Hello, guys. It's Christina Barr with blacktnews.com. And today I just got back from, well, just a little bit ago from a press conference at the Oakland County Republican office. And they had a press conference with the chair of the Michigan Republican Party, Laura Cox, and the RNC chair, Ronna McDaniel. And they were talking about some pretty serious allegations of um, irregularities and fraud and and software issues that ended up making it so that ballots that should have gone to Republicans went to Democrats. And so, to address that really quickly, there's I recorded the press conference. It's on my Facebook page on Black T News. So, and you can go ahead and watch that. And I'm sure everyone's writing about it in Michigan right now. But for example, I think a lot of, if you've been on the internet, you know that Atrium County had discrepancies, which other people in elections pointed out because they weren't getting the results that they expected. And so they reached out to the county, and they figured out that that there was an issue with the software, which it flipped the votes that are supposed to go to Trump and Biden, apparently. And so there was like a 6,000 point vote difference. So they ended up having to fix the error, but it turned out the same software was used in like 47 other counties. So they need to I don't know if that means that anyone's had any other issues like that, but they were just saying we at least want people to look into that and see. So it could have just been the one incident, we don't know, but they were just addressing it, that they're looking into those things. And then another incident they were talking about was someone who was actually a paid election worker was given directives to enter in dates of ballots coming in that didn't have any evidence that they were properly real ballots that came in. And so there was they were talking about reports of a whistleblower. And so if their accounts, what they gave with the actual whistleblower is true, what they're talking about is real, genuine election fraud. And another thing they talked about was that the number of ballots that they were reporting that they had, and then after more came in, it wasn't consistent. And of course, there were lots of people there and outside who were like waving Trump flags and other stuff like that. People who were there as poll watchers who had accounts of things that had happened. They said they got hundreds of like reports and things that they are looking into. They asked if people who, if they saw anything, to please contact certain contact information. And the chairwoman talked about how these were stories that she heard, just not from like out of nowhere, but from people that she knows and people who she trusts. I know people who have reached out to her and said, look, they always play games in Detroit. People who have worked consistently with elections in Detroit, and said there's some even crazier stuff that they've heard go on or seen go on, and that they need to look at it. The president and John James, they have like really big discrepancies. I don't want anyone to give their hopes up and think that there's going to be something so massive that even if they did a recount, that the vote would flip. And that was the question that a reporter asked, and she kind of like was like, we need to at least look into it. We're not jumping the gun with whether we're going to do a recount or something like that. But because I unless there was like really huge, massive voter fraud proven, you're not going to be able to flip a result with that, with it so massive. But with a lead like that. But I thought when I went to sleep that night, or kind of tried to go to sleep, that with Trump having such huge numbers, that they'd be able to withstand Detroit. So the margins that they overcame was just absolutely extraordinary. And so so there's a lot of stuff that they're looking into. And but one thing I want to say, she kept saying, I want the press to, you guys can look into it, help us look into it. We just want to ensure a fair election. And we spent millions and millions of taxpayer dollars with the Russia investigation, and then with the obstruction of justice stuff. And the truth was that we found out that the FBI knew that there was Steele dossier and stuff that they used wasn't good in like December of 2016. That's stuff like we recently learned. And that the FBI knew their investigation was so sketchy that they got liability insurance before the president was even inaugurated. And so you had all these things go on, and the Russia stuff was a bust. The collusion stuff was a bust. They impeached the president with no real crimes alleged at the start of this coronavirus crisis. And it was obviously a dud because they didn't even mention it much on the campaign trail. And they did all these things and called the president illegitimate, not my president, all this other stuff for years. So the fact that people are so anxious to get this election over, which I can understand why, because frankly, I didn't like being part of the recount in 2016, but the Jill Stein stuff was she didn't even get 1% of the vote. So we ended up being able to shut that down early, but it was just annoying having to do it at all. But so I get people who are on the other side, like, can't we just say we won and it's over? I totally understand that, but I do think it's important just to at least investigate some of these things that are being reported and going on, just for fairness sake, for election integrity, for people to be able to move on and accept the, that with Joe Biden being the president or whatever. And I'm like oddly, like kind of chill about like I'm just kind of like, I can imagine like all the outrage and the tears that people had in 2016. Cause I'm just like, I'm like nowhere near that point, even though like, I know I don't want to, like, I dread like his pick for like education secretary and all that, like stuff like that. And I remember how they persecuted people like in their administration. Obama, Biden did have scandals. If you believe that, you're a low information voter. I'm sorry. Because there was a lot of stuff that happened in their administration. I'm not looking forward to if there's any kind of repeats, but like I can move on and accept whatever, like right now. But I just think it's important that we at least look at some of these things going on. I don't know too much about what's going on in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and other insiders would know more than I would about those states and if there's shenanigans there. But I know that Detroit has history of shenanigans. And for example, when we had the recount in 2016, there was so many precincts that had so many irregularities that they could not recount the ballots because, and they had, it was like 37%. And where is it? 37% or 37? Hold on. Let me get that correct. Yeah, 37% of the Detroit precincts had more votes. Overall, the state record showed 10.6% of the precincts in the 22 counties that began the retabulation process couldn't be recounted because the state law that bars recounts from unbalanced precincts were ones with broken seals. So there was just so many issues that were going on during the recount, and that I think they were probably glad that they stopped it, because Detroit was getting like shellacked and it really embarrassed about how inconsistent everything was. And so that same clerk who was there is still the same city clerk now. And there were some people trying to call for her to step down and stuff, but she continued. And Jocelyn Benson, after she won and she wanted to have like an election integrity committee or to talk about reform and stuff, who did she put on her council? Janice Winfrey. So, which it's a very big city, which I can understand that you'd want to have representation from that clerk there, but she's also someone who very much did not do a very good job. And so she's still a clerk. There's other people who've been attached to Detroit elections who allegedly gave instructions about how to handle ballots that came in that were illegal, very serious allegations that they laid out and that they need to look at, and the attorney general and other people need to seriously look at. So I want everyone to have faith in our process at least, but people know that there's been shenanigans in Detroit a lot, and some people that I know who have worked those elections they've said that a lot of things they think happen because of incompetence rather than, I guess, mass malice. But I think in this case we're seeing that there's both, and they're poll workers and stuff that were told directives that made some of them uncomfortable. And people who I've talked to have said it was kind of fine throughout the day until the polls closed, and then it was kind of evident that there was like orders from on high. So yeah, so there's serious things that I think people need to look into. There's people who I talked to who worked at the Secretary of State for years who said Detroit has always had issues, and Republicans have kind of failed to rein them in, whether because they didn't want to look like, I don't know, racist for talking about, I don't know, these clerks in these big minority cities. I don't know, but they never really had really good accountability with a lot of the shenanigans that were happening there. So what I do also want to talk about is that the response from media I noticed in the room, because the chairwoman Ronna kept saying, hey, we want everybody to look into these things. We think it's important for people to look into things. We invite the media to talk to people. There's people here who worked there that night. You can get stories from them. And so when it was over, there were some people doing interviews asking like, why are you here today? And someone asked Bobby Hesley, who I did an interview with him election night, and he has a media following, and they asked him what would he do if he was allowed in the center, and you found that there was nothing wrong. And he was like, I kind of reject the premise of your question. He's like, why did you ask me what I would do if we found something? Or you're just kind of trying to assume that, you know, the things that people are saying didn't happen. And so so he kind of tried to flip it around on him a little bit, but he was there and he got to ask them a question, and he wanted to know what they were going to do about people blocking the doors or putting padlocks on them, which what probably wasn't great for like fire hazard reasons. And he said that he mentioned that he had footage of the poll workers and other people like cheering when like Republican lawyers were thrown out. And so I overheard some people, and I believe they're from Fox 2 News, like local Fox 2, and saying like, oh, how did he get that footage if they weren't supposed to have phones? So they didn't care about what he was saying. They were just like, how could he even have that? Did he break the rules? And blah, 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 like had really kind of attitude about it. We're kind of laughing about it. So I was right there. And so this didn't happen on, I believe his footage and stuff that he got happened from after the main like counting and stuff of the day. And I think this was like on maybe the 4th is what he told me. And so I got to my friend Christina, who was there for like 37 hours. And so she told me that you couldn't have phones until after like the polls had closed. And then eventually they told them that they could get their phones, but she never went to go get her phone because people would leave and they wouldn't let them back in. So she didn't want to take the chance that they wouldn't let her back in. So she never went to go get her phone. So, but she said people were allowed to go get their phone. So the allegation of like, oh, I thought they were breaking the rules, like that didn't really fly. So I got her because I didn't want to misspeak and give the wrong information when I like in front of the media. So then she started talking to them about the stuff that she witnessed, and it was just like listening but not really caring. It seemed like they kind of, you know, asked her questions and stuff and a little bit, and they don't have to take it at face value. I mean, they're the media, they should investigate, but to pretend like they weren't biased, you know, they just didn't believe or care, or were kind of hostile to the perspectives of the people in the room. And so there was someone who was standing next to her who was like, I just want to back up some of the stuff she was saying, because Christina told them about accounts that she had witnessed about how they pushed through ballots that should have clearly been invalid and thrown out. And so the man next to her was trying to show them something on their phone, and so I didn't see what it was, and that he was showing them, but they were like, I don't know what that is. And so he's trying to explain it. He's like, yeah, but you like he didn't think that they could prove it because he was just showing an image on their phone. And then the camera person was like, well, I heard you talking about Hillary and Russia earlier, so I don't really care or believe anything you have to say. So, and Christina was just like, she's showing you he's showing you something right now that's on the phone. So why don't you just look at his evidence and judge it based off of that? So and which I think this man, I can't be 100%, but I did hear earlier someone talking about Hillary and Russia, and I think they were specifically talking about the Steele dossier. So if this man was talking about that and that was the same person, then that kind of did start as Oppo research and then it evolved and mutated into what it was. So and that's another crazy thing, like all this election stuff. How is this any crazier for the media to accept or believe, or at least even seriously investigate, when they were the ones chasing Russia, Russia, Russia for all these years? Like, because they wanted that story to be true, and they wanted the public to feel a certain way. And there are still people who believe that Trump is a Russia puppet and all this other stuff. So it was I don't know, guys. I just don't I want to have faith that in the end that these things will be investigated and people will be held accountable. But I don't know how many people are going to stand up for the good fight, because I don't think the media is really there. Like, I think they're going to at least look into stuff. I mean, people have been looking into stuff, but I saw like a thread the other day about how they were trying to disprove and debunk stuff, and people were like, yeah, sharing this thread. I'm like going through, I'm like, this isn't a good thread. What are they talking about? And then they were talking about Jocelyn Benson was they were saying, and I was reading reports about how people were saying Republicans were fairly represented, and Ronna and Laura Cox were like, no, that isn't true. And I heard from people who were there were saying, no, that wasn't true. And they were saying that people were kicked out and they weren't replaced. And so then the reporters were like, I personally talked to Jocelyn Benson. Are you calling her a liar? And Ronna is like, well, I'm saying she's giving you inaccurate information. So yeah, they can she's like, talk to the people here, like investigate it more thoroughly. And then like in like the Free Press, it talked about alleged that they had equal representation, and they were like, and there were other groups that were nonpartisan there. And the nonpartisan groups they listed was the ACLU and the League of Women Voters. And I got at least 2 texts from the ACLU pushing a Democrat candidate, and they didn't say, please go vote for this Democrat candidate, but how they worded it, it was like they say something positive about some things about the particular person, and they're like, look at the record. And they would say something that was like, Lynn, who's running against her, they sort of say something negative about her, and then they'd have a link to whatever. And so I got a text from them. My sister got a text from them. And when it happened to me, I wrote it on Facebook about how the ACLU, was blatantly like supporting this other person. And so, which upset, the Republican candidate, but they're definitely not, that organization is definitely biased, and people who are familiar with the League of Women Voters and stuff, they're very careful when they do interviews and, with them, or when they do surveys, or when they participate in debates and stuff, because they do sway a particular way. And most people do, just to be honest. I mean, a lot of people who want to say we're going to have something that's nonpartisan, or we're going to do something that's bipartisan, a lot of times aren't handled well, because people do have biases. And I understand that, like, you guys are watching me. I clearly have I'm a right-leaning person. I'm as conservative as you can get, I suppose. But you can be transparent. I guess transparency is just really the huge issue going on right now. So yeah, I don't know how much the media is going to take these accounts seriously, because even what happens when they find something they don't like, and they're outright choosing to not believe people who they, so which to a degree I can understand if they've heard someone else say something that they don't believe, I guess. Because I know a lot of people who were there at TFC and watching the counting and stuff. And sometimes there are people who are really enthusiastic, who are there who are patriots, and there's sometimes some of those people are there. You'll find a handful of people who are a little kooky, but there are people who I know who are rock solid, who I talk to, who the chairwoman talked to, who they believe when they heard certain things happened. And then there's people who have experience from other elections that they just know that shenanigans and stuff go on. It's just true. There's been discrepancies in other things in the past. It's just the truth. Um, so, but with the media just being so blatantly rude to people, um, was pretty intense to me, like watching it go down. And I believe the same reporter I saw at OCRP during the midterms when Lisa Lyons was announced as the pick for Bill Schuette for the lieutenant governor. And this was at a time when Trump was like in going back and forth with Omarosa, and Omarosa had decided to flip and totally turn into a villain, I guess. And so Trump had called her a dog or something, or lying dog, or excuse me, I don't remember the direct quote. And so what did the reporters have to ask Lisa Lyons, not about her record and her experience? A lot of them really wanted to know about what she thought about Trump calling this Omarosa a dog. And that's specifically what this reporter asked her. And I was right there, and I was just like thinking, really, that's the question you want to ask? But then Lisa Lyons, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she handled herself so well. I was like, you get all the snaps. And Lisa heard me, and she kind of turned and smiled. But I was disappointed with the media that day, and I was disappointed in the media in Michigan, I suppose, who were there, who were kind of hostile to the people there. And it's just a shame. And like, I know there's the national media that you hammer on and stuff, but there's definitely bias locally and too, and which I understand and which I totally accept, but it was unprofessional. I guess that's what also bothers me too. So if you can't verify what the person said, and you can't go on it or whatever, that's fine, but you could at least try to do some more digging, or at least not to tell the person, I don't believe what you said because I didn't like the other thing that you said earlier too. I mean, the media talks about how Trump is hostile toward them, but this is why Americans or Republicans enjoy when Trump kind of like talks back to them, because they know how they are. So yeah, I've talked to I've been working on a story and with about some of the things I've heard, and I'll have that on Black Tea News soon. But I've been talking to people who work for the Secretary of State for years, and people who were there at the event, and people who have done canvassing and poll watching and stuff in Detroit for years. And there's just shenanigans afoot, and it's just but there always is. But again, I don't know if anything will come out of any kind of recount or anything like that, but I think it's worth to ensure that we have integrity in our elections. And it could be that you'll find some stuff. I'm sure we will. There's going to be some ballots and stuff that shouldn't have been counted. I'm sure we'll find some irregularities in other stuff. I think we'll probably find some people that need to probably be investigated and maybe even go to jail. But do I think there's going to be a huge number that could overturn Michigan's results? I don't know. That I can't say, and that I'd have to be kind of more pessimistic about. But do I think it's worth investigating? Yes, because something like this can't continue to stand. And if Trump goes down as a one-term fantastic president who's going to be kind of a folk hero, who I'm sure history will be much kinder to than the media was, then that's just the reality of the situation, and we'll move on with the rest of life. And Black Tea will be here to cover the Biden-Harris administration for the next 4 years and what comes afterwards, because we know the real media didn't really do their job during the Obama administration. So, but I think it is important for the president to fight, and to the people, I'm sure he's getting a lot of pressure to concede because a lot of Republicans got what they wanted. They got a lot of judges, they got three, conservative justices, they got they didn't like get creamed in the House or whatever. They gained some seats. They Right now it looks like they're maintaining control of the Senate. So I think a lot of establishment people are like, oh, we've actually have a really good result right now. And so I think a lot of people are probably pressuring him to go ahead and concede. But again, like, people had to be involved in the Bush Gore thing for 37 days. We can withstand and go through um a recount, because we sure shouldn't have had to do a recount in 2016, and I had to count those ballots and it ruined my vacation. And if I had to go through that, you all can hold on to your horses and just endure and go through whatever we're going through. I know there's some uncertainty right now, but Trump is going to be the president to the end of the year regardless of what happens. And then whatever happens, it is what it is. But I do want to note before I go that people were acting like they were so scared of Trump supporters doing whatever. But we're not rioting in the streets or anything like that. There's people waving flags and having rallies or whatever, but there's no crazy protests like there were when Trump was elected, and there won't be riots and stuff if Biden is inaugurated, like there was when Trump was, which I wrote an article about in the Detroit News, recalling the things that happened when I went to the inauguration, and people who waved a "Rape Melania" sign on in New York and stuff at their protests when Trump was elected. So no one's having the emotional breakdowns. There are people kind of laughing at Trump supporters for saying just let it go, but they just want to make sure the election was fair and free. And people will be sad. I don't think you're not gonna find a bunch of crying hysterical breakdown videos like people were laughing about in 2016. But we'll learn to move on. We just want to make sure the election is fair, and if there are shenanigans, that there's things in place. People want all ballots counted. They just want to make sure that they're legal ballots, and that everybody should want the same thing. And Democrats were saying, how come Trump didn't want to be investigated if he's got nothing to hide? Which, then he should just be okay with it. Which is kind of crazy though, because people can usually find stuff, and to be frank, or like invent stuff. I can't believe, it's amazing that they didn't invent something or anything like that with the president. He just kind of came out all clear with everything. So some people who didn't like Trump, who were still conservative, were like, this guy is cleaner than I thought he was after all these years of investigation. But anyway, Democrats can just kind of take their own medicine that they've been giving conservatives for a while now, and just, we'll have a couple investigations, we'll have a recount in Pennsylvania and Georgia, and perhaps not Michigan, but they should. I agree with my friend Christina Carmano, who was there, who said that we need to look at every absentee ballot that came in. But there's a plot afoot, guys, and I just want to make sure that if shady stuff happened, that these things definitely can't happen again. I don't know if any results could be overturned, and if the president won't still be the president after all, the inauguration and everything happens. But it is what it is. But we have to at least do our best to make sure that elections are free and fair in America. In America. So I'm going to go ahead and go. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen. And if you haven't watched that press conference, please go ahead and listen to it directly from the mouths of the chairwomen, and investigate yourselves. You don't have to get like caught up in like conspiracy theories, and don't share something unless you kind of do some digging and verifying it. And if you do share it, just don't share it like it's a fact. If you're confused, just say, I want to understand this, and talk to someone who may understand it more than you. Let's not try to spread false information Um, I'm doing my best not to do that, and I'm doing my best to talk to people who I think are credible, and talk to people who have experience. And so do your be diligent yourself. If you saw something, report it. Um, but it is important to talk to people who to report, I guess, to the GOP or whoever who might have people who would have people on staff who would know if something went down, because sometimes people do report things and they're kind of overzealous. So they need to go through each allegation, because some of them probably won't pan out either. But there's definitely things that I heard that were wrong. So be careful about the things that you share as well, and I'll really try to do that, and hold myself accountable, and you guys do that too, as we all try to figure this out together. But God bless you guys. God bless America. Please follow Black Tea on here, on Facebook, on YouTube and Twitter, wherever you're watching me. Submit your email address, because I don't know, social media is so crazy. Who knows, one day it could be gone. And please, if you could support Black Tea News, go to the website, leave we call them love offerings in church, but donation, um and update like merchandise and other stuff like that. But help me be able to continue to deliver um the truth. So God bless you guys, and keep fighting the good fight.